Hello everybody, today we are looking at the build of this, the Airfix Bf109F-4 starter set, as per the Dogfight Double release with the North American P51D. Oh, that is a mouthful, but I clarified that this is of course the starter set tooling, even though this is not marketed as such, but it was nice to pick it up, just one, to see what it's like, and two, as an easy build. So we are going to see if indeed this is an easy build. There is already an unboxing video for the entire set, which will be linked above, so please check that out if you haven't already. This video will pick up from where that drops off, which is of course starting to build the thing. And if you are new here, you could do a favour, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and also make everyone a round of tea, because if you're new here, you haven't been part of the tea rota yet. So come on, make everyone else a cup of tea, be nice, be friendly, go and get some biscuits, and sit down and just listen to me rambling while some plastic gets glued together in the background. And on that note, we should probably start with the rambling and the gluing and things. This was a brand new tooling for 2024, the date that this was released. There is one decal scheme per aircraft. You can get another 109F-4 on its own, but and another one in a starter set with the Spitfire, but as per this box, there is only one decal scheme for each aircraft. There are 30 parts for the Messerschmitt 109, and I've put the recommended retail price as $11.99 for the aircraft on its own, but in this particular set, with all the paints and everything, is $19.99. Construction begins in the way society tells us is normal, with the interior, and being a starter set, the detail here is minimum, but it's not lacking, it's just cleverly designed, so there's lots of moulded detail but almost no separate parts. We do have this piece here for the exhausts, which are asymmetric, and so it gives us a big arrow telling us which way is forwards. I like that. I think that should just be on every kit. It doesn't need to be a starter set, it just needs to be on every kit. Very, very helpful. And we have this clever little piece at the back, so you can have the tail wheel up or down depending on which hole you glue it in. I'm doing it with the undercarriage up, as you may have seen. As such, we're getting out the Hitaka Ocean Grey. This is of course RAF Ocean Grey, not appropriate at all for anything Luftwaffe, so I'm using it for the pilot's uniform. The instructions here are not very helpful because they are designed to use just the colours included. The Hitaka Black Grey RLM 66 is then coming out for the actual interior. So what I've done is I have looked up, using other instructions and my own knowledge, what this aircraft would likely have been painted, and then I'm using that rather than relying on the starter set style instructions. And that told me that pale sand would be an appropriate colour for the harness straps on the pilot. So we've got the uniform is based in 106 grey, which is being used as an undercoat. Then this Vallejo sand is being used for the harnesses, and then we've got Vallejo black being brushed on for the rest of the uniform. So the suggestion is that the jacket would be black, the trousers would be grey, and the detail would be, well, whatever colour the detail needs to be. I normally don't bother painting pilots because I don't bother putting pilots in, so it was actually quite refreshing to paint a pilot for once in a while. Yeah, like I say, it doesn't happen often, and this pilot seems to be pretty well detailed. Of course, we do need to give him some flesh. So I've got this enamel Humbrol Matte 61, which is a flesh colour, which is then just brush painted onto the face. Why am I using an enamel paint? Well, I have never actually gone out and bought an acrylic flesh tone, so all I have for flesh is Humbrol 61. And since I don't paint people very frequently, so far it has been absolutely fine. It does, of course, need a fair bit of time to dry. And the end result then, I've also got a bit of brown on the pilot's gloves and of course black on the boots, but this is okay. He now can squeeze in on the single piece interior, so just sits on the moulded seat, his feet fit on the moulded rudder pedals. He has been beautifully designed to fit in the side here. Just be sure to follow the instructions and glue him in before the fuselage halves go together, because the Messerschmitt 109 famously had an incredibly cramped cockpit, and you can't just fold his plastic arms in like you could a real person. It's also interesting to note that, spoilers, the P51 included with this Dogfight Double has a hilariously underscale pilot, and yet this one in the smaller plane is actually perfect. Anyway, the only issue with assembly was this tiny little bit here. The wing was just a bit bent and didn't want to glue. So I used some clamp persuasion to get that to stick. It didn't need anything else, didn't need any hot water or anything to change the warping. It just needed a clamp to hold it in. And we can now assemble the bits that we've got together. The fuselage to the wings. As you'd expect, there are no fit issues. This is designed to be churned out in large numbers for a long amount of time and be sold to people that have no idea what they're doing with scale models. It is obviously an easy kit to assemble and didn't need any filler or any effort, really. Just read the instructions and put the bits where they need to be. It was very refreshing. Although actually one of the underwing radiators was also a little bit stubborn in going in the right way, and so that required the same persuasion as the wing did, which is why one of them is clamped but the other was not. And because I'm doing this with the gear up, I've glued those in and we can move over to painting. The entire aircraft has been primed in white. This is just a cheap Halford's white primer in a rattle can, and the reason for priming it in white is yellow. RLM-04, which is Vallejo 71078, is being used for the yellow parts. So white first, then yellow. Definitely don't get that wrong. Don't spray yellow on black. You'll be here all day. But it's airbrush ready, so just chucked in the airbrush and yellow is put on the relevant yellow part under the nose and the tail. We then have RLM-76 by Hataka. This is blue line stuff, so it's thinned a little bit with Hataka acrylic thinner just to give it a better consistency for an airbrush, but can then be sprayed on. I have had a few problems with Hataka paints in the past. They don't like going through the airbrush even with the thinner. Now I know I'm using non-airbrush ready paints for an airbrush, so it's partly my fault, but this one in particular was a bit stubborn. This one, however, RLM-75 Grey Violet, is much better through an airbrush as long as you get the consistency right. And I'm just using tape underneath the wing to make sure there's no accidental bleed from any weird angles that I do, and spraying the entire top surfaces of the aircraft as a soft divide, as I believe would be correct for this era of German aircraft. Then I'm switching to Vallejo. We have RLM-74, which is Model Air 71258, and this is used for mottling and the camouflage pattern. Now, why am I using Vallejo and not staying true with my Hataka brandedness? Well, I bought my Hataka paints in sets, and this colour is not included in any of the sets, so I had to go out and buy it separately. Still, if you can excuse the occasional elbowing of the camera, I wanted to show this mottling rather than do what I've done in the past with things like my Focke-Wulf 190 and shy away and just talk about it and show the after effects. My approach to this was an airbrush style of stabbing in the dark. Just blitz a few bits, just a tiny bit of paint in supposedly random order and hope for the best. Well, we'll see if that looks good later on, won't we? But the green is then also used for the camouflage patterns, which, again, being late war German, is a much softer approach than what you may be familiar with in the early war period, where it was all straight lines and right angles. With all of that done then, the next step is the propeller assembly, which is fairly simple so long as you follow the instructions and are very careful with where you put your glue. We have the main base plate of the hub, I suppose is what you'd call it. Then the propeller blades are all glued together on top of that. Then you put the spinner on top of that, and if you are careful with your paint, you also have the ability to keep it rotating. To keep it rotating, you have the ability for it to rotate. There we go, word better, with this pin through this mounting plate, if you like. So the pin goes through the bit that mounts on the fuselage and then into the spinner hub. So as long as you're very careful with the paint, it turns. RLM-70 could then be painted over the entire assembly. Don't forget, the Germans did not paint the propeller assemblies black or the propeller blades black, so don't do that. If you do that, then you are basically going to result in Christmas being cancelled forever, so please don't. The entire aircraft was then gloss varnished with just Vallejo acrylic varnish, whatever I have, through the airbrush, and we can place the decals. This is a starter set tooling, but this is clearly not a paint scheme designed for starters with all the mottling and complicated colours and whatever. However, they have still kept the very cleverly designed decals to have as few as possible and as easy to apply as possible. So there's no complicated stenciling. They, for example, here you can see there's a little first aid marker which is on the cross rather than being separate. And so you're left with this odd mix of a kit which is clearly meant to be very easy to assemble, and it's meant to have very few decals for those that maybe don't want loads of decals, but a paint scheme that can really only be reproduced with an airbrush rather than the supplied paintbrushes. Personally, quite appreciate that because, again, as I've said many times, I wanted it to be a fairly easy Mojo build. And I suppose, realistically, if you're the sort of person that wants the highest detailed Messerschmitt 109F-4, you're not going to be buying this release from Airfix anyway. So, yeah, even though it's a bit odd, I can understand it, and I don't really have a problem with it. Anyway, the RLM 66 comes back out, this time being brush painted onto the stand, which has been primed in black. My idea for these stands is always to do something a little bit more interesting than just have them one colour, so I tried to replicate the basic camouflage pattern of the aircraft, except in black and grey. So kind of like a shadow camo. Yeah, something like that. Although annoyingly, the RLM 66 is very thin, and this did take, I think, 4 coats in the end just to try and get the sort of consistency that I liked. Next, we have the canopy, which, being a tricky part to get right, is very simple. It's got a hole in the back and you can slot it in, and you probably don't even need to glue it. But I did add small amounts of glue just to keep it secure, and it had already been painted, as you can see, using the RLM 75 as seen earlier. It does look a little bit more grey, a little bit more pronounced than the airbrush stuff, but never mind. And now we've only got 2 more things to glue on, which is the antenna mast, as you saw there, and the completed propeller assembly. Although, yes, I do also glue the plane onto the stand because it just isn't secure enough to be precariously perched on it, and I don't want it to fall off. And in case you're wondering, yes, the propellers do still spin. I did successfully get them turning. Not really necessary, but hey. And finally, just as a little extra showpiece, I've got some very, very thin white paint, and I'm just flooding the Airfix recess in the logo. This is more appropriate, in my opinion, for a German release, which of course had just a white cross on the top. It's a kind of a low contrast marking, so that is what I've tried to replicate here. And then we are done, finally. So let's have a look at the end product. Being a starter set tooling from 2024, this kit is obviously very easy to assemble. It did not put up any resistance, even with the tiny problem of the wing, but I didn't even need a clamp. I could have just put my fingers on that and applied pressure that way. It was a joy to build. It fell together, made in basically a day, and then painted over the next couple of days. And I really like the end result. This is so far my best attempt at German mottling, and overall I think is actually the most attractive German aircraft I have made. I do like German aircraft, but I admit I am put off by the fact that you can't really do them without an airbrush. They just don't look right. And so I would question why this has ended up in a Dogfight Double with a relatively complicated scheme. Was there much else that Airfix could have done? Well, I suppose no. It's difficult because I can completely understand you want a German aircraft in these sets, but if you're going to do it with a P-51, then you're going to have to do a model scheme. There isn't really a choice. And I suppose you can do it with a brush, but there's certainly much higher skill level required than I would like to see as a beginner. I guess I'm not a beginner anymore, but you know what I mean. I'm trying to put myself in the perspective of a beginner. I do think that the pilot is fantastic. I'm glad that they included it, but even more than that, because again, spoiler for the P-51, I'm glad that the pilot is nicely designed and actually sits in the aircraft. And of course, the inclusion of the shadow stand in line with all modern Airfix starter sets, very much appreciated. Just adds that little bit of difference that you can see from just a plain stand. So yes, overall, I thoroughly recommend this. Even if you're an experienced modeler, you can get this for not very much money, and you can throw it together in a day and kind of treat it as a palette cleanser. You're struggling with something a bit complicated? Well, not with this, you're not. You're just going to be able to throw it together, give it a quick paint scheme, fine. And if not, if you want to experiment with a new airbrush or you want to experiment with a new style, then again, these kits are really good for that. But here I am trying to paint it as a serious model. I don't want to say that this isn't a serious model. It is a serious model, but you get it. You get what I mean. Starter set on one side, serious model on the other side. If you treat it like that, I'm painting this like I would paint any other model, and the result, yeah, I don't think you would instantly be able to go, oh, that's clearly a set designed for a kid. So Airfix have absolutely knocked it out the park, blown it out the water, demolished it out of a building that was going to be demolished. I've run out of idioms for doing well. Airfix have done well. There we go. That's my review. Airfix have done well. Let me know in the comments below if you have made this kit or if you're interested in it, or is the fact that it's a starter set tooling just something that's put you off? Because I'm interested. My opinions are obviously not the only ones, and I would genuinely like to know. I really do like making kits like this from time to time, but I wouldn't want to do nothing but these. But it was certainly an enjoyable experience, and it looks very nice with the P51D, which will follow in due course on the channel. So if you do want to see that, don't forget to hit the notification bell so you are notified when a new video is live, and you can hit the like button to tell me that you like it, or you can just dislike the video just to be a troll and make me cry. You could also become a channel member and prove that you are a super fan like these people on screen, who I appreciate greatly. These people will get images of things that I'm working on, and maybe I'll pose a question every now and again, and little emojis and whatever. But mostly, they just get to go to bed at night knowing that they have helped a weird person on the internet throw bits of plastic into the carpet monster's mouth. And isn't that what we all really want in life? So thank you. Thank you all. And until next time, just exist. Goodbye.